Today I'm going to show you how to make this classic loaf of bread right at home. A sandwich loaf, also known as a sandwich bread or pandemi, is a type of bread specifically designed for making sandwiches. It typically has a soft and tender crumb with a fine texture, making it perfect for holding together various sandwich fillings without overpowering them. Alright, so the first step for a sandwich loaf is to bloom our yeast. So how we do that is, here we have some warm water. Just going to add in some whole milk. To that, we're going in with our sweetener. In this case, we're using honey. Now, traditionally for sandwich loaves, you typically use white sugar to help keep it, give it that classic white color. A lot of people alternatively use brown sugar, but I find the honey just adds that extra bit of flavor. So we're just going to mix this together to help incorporate the honey before we add the yeast. Blooming your yeast really helps to kickstart the fermentation process, help to add a little extra flavor and also cut down the time in your proofing of your sandwich loaf. Yeast tends to want to clump up, so you want to try and break up those clumps as best as you could, but it's not the end of the world if one or two clumps remain. So we're going to cover and let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes to allow the yeast to bloom. 15 minutes has passed, so let's check out our bloomed yeast. So you see how the fermentation is already kick-started. See all those bubbles at the top, how much more volume it's gotten during that time. So this is what we're aiming for, active yeast. Alright, so here now, I'm just gonna sift some all-purpose unbleached flour before I add in my salt. The salt, I'm using sea salt, and I'm using better quality flour today, because I think, like, if you're gonna go through all the trouble of making bread yourself, you might as well start with better ingredients, or at least treat yourself to some a little more expensive ingredients, because I think the ingredients go a long way in determining the end product. Sift out any lumps, which will give you a much more even end product. And also, another thing to note with baking, you always want to weigh your ingredients, because the weight is really the only way you can guarantee you can get that precise measurement. Also note that I'm not adding in any fat as yet. What we want to do, we want to give the protein in the flour some time to bind and form its basket weave and develop structure for our sandwich loaf. So the first step, I'm gonna activate the protein by adding the liquid. I'm gonna mix that in as you see me doing here. I'm just using my fingers almost like a dough hook. Just bringing in the dry flour and salt slowly. Now at this point you could expect your dough may be a little dry, but that's okay, because remember, you still have to add in your butter. So we're just gonna knead this into a shaggy ball of dough, and we're gonna let that rest. And while it's resting, the flour, which is a starch, is gonna absorb all the moisture, absorb that honey, absorb the water, and develop structure. Protein strands within the flour are gonna bind and form a basket weave, which is gonna help give your sandwich loaf that fine crumb and also help with the leavening as well. So all I'm doing, I'm just bringing up the sides and pressing it into the middle and pushing it back out. Cover this with some cling wrap, or if you have a cover for your bowl, a plate, anything like that, and just let it sit. Allow the protein in the flour to absorb the moisture, build structure before we add in the fat, in this case butter. Alright, so 5 minutes has passed. Room temperature unsalted butter. You want this at room temperature because it makes life a lot easier when incorporating, and you want to incorporate this in smaller amounts. So this is 4 tablespoons or 57 grams. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to divide it into 4 portions or 1 tablespoon each and incorporate it into our dough. About a tablespoon worth, And it's gonna get a little messy before it gets better, but have no fear. Just take your time and slowly incorporate it. Of course, you could do this with a stand mixer, but this is just one loaf of bread, so this is nothing to do with your hand. But if you prefer, by all means, use your stand mixer. So the fat will break up the dough a little bit before being fully absorbed. So you can just take your time, knead it in, and make sure each portion is fully incorporated before you add the other. And also, you could use your ball of dough to clean your bowl with any remaining butter that may have gone up the sides. So you see the first set is more or less incorporated. So I'm going in again, another tablespoon worth, spread it around with my fingers, and then knead it in. Also want to take this time to mention today's sponsor, our friends at Courts, who have graciously decided to sponsor this video, and they also outfitted the entire Foodie Nation kitchen. So we want to thank our friends at Courts. Just continue to knead until all your butter is incorporated, and you just continue to repeat the process. And with sandwich loaf or pan bread, the hydration rate or the amount of water in comparison to flour is traditionally high. It's about a 70% hydration. So you should expect a soft dough or a softer dough. And that is a big reason why we are pausing at so much intervals and allowing the dough to rest and absorb that moisture. There are three things you always want to factor in when baking: time, temperature, and water. And as long as you learn how to manipulate those three things, you'll be well on your way to being a successful baker. So in order to allow the dough to absorb all that moisture, you're just introducing time, allowing it to rest at different intervals to absorb the moisture, allow the protein strands to bind together, build structure, rather than you just add all the ingredients in one go and knead and let it rest. This is a bit longer, yes, but you'll see the end results. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce time one more time. I'm just going to cover it and let it sit for about 10 minutes. Just allow the dough to absorb the butter. Let the protein in the flour rest before we do a final knead, and then allow it to proof. Time has passed, so we're going in for a final knead now. Just bringing in the sides, pushing it back out. Of course, if you feel more comfortable doing this on the counter, you could do it on the counter as well. This here should take anywhere from like 3, max 5 minutes. Just drop a little oil in our bowl. Use the ball of dough to just help spread it around. You could even flip it over. Bring it in a little bit. Right, and now what we're going to do, we're going to cover it. And you could place it in your microwave, place it in your oven. You want a nice warm place. I would say ideal temperature would be about 84 degrees Fahrenheit. And you let that sit and let it rise, let it do its thing. The yeast will continue to feed on the sweetness or the sugars from the honey, the natural sugars within the flour, and continue to leaven the dough. So we're just going to cover it, put it in a nice warm environment, as I said, ideally around 84 degrees Fahrenheit, and let it do its thing about an hour or so, or until doubled in size. Alright, so as you can see here, our dough has more than doubled in size, and we're right at the 45-minute mark. So a big factor, remember when I was speaking about time, temperature, and water or moisture. Well, a big factor to also consider is the ambient temperature of your environment. So we are here in the tropics in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's midday, so it's pretty humid. So therefore, it's not going to take an hour for this to do its thing. So now, what we're gonna do, we're gonna degas it. Let's get all those large bubbles out. This will prevent, you know, sometimes you slice into bread and you see those large bubbles. Yeah, this will help to prevent that. If you see any, you know, just don't be afraid to burst them. All right, just get rid of this board. And then I'm gonna turn it over. Alright. So what I'm doing here now is I'm just shaping it out, so let's, you could call it a square if you will. And ideally I want it about the length of my baking pan, which is 8 inches long, 4 inches wide, 3.5 inches tall. So from here, I'm just pressing into it to deflate any gas bubbles that I may have missed. And then I'm just bringing in this side, I'm folding it into thirds, bringing in the other side, rolling in and pressing down, rolling in, pressing down, rolling in, pressing down. Just repeating that process until I reach the end. And when I reach the end, I'm just gonna roll it out, tuck in the ends. And if I could just ask for it to come down here just to show. So when I'm bringing it in, I'm actually pushing in the sides, and this will help to tighten the dough. And then I'm just bringing the top layer over the sides, just to cover the sides, to help to shape and tighten the dough, give it a little uniformity. Right, so we bring the pan here now, lift it up, place it, bring the pan up for you to see, place it in the pan, seam side down, and now what we're going to do, we're going to let them rest again. Ideally, we want the loaf to rise about 1 inch or so, at the highest point of the loaf at least, which is typically the center, rise about 1 inch over the pan before we put them in the oven. So that should take anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the temperature of your environment. All right, so let's check on our loaf. Wow, so you can see how much it's proofed. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna throw them in the oven set at 350 degrees Fahrenheit and let that bake off in a steam bath for about 30 minutes. All right, so it's time to put in our bread. So as you can see, it's right above, directly above a baking pan filled with hot water, and then to that, I'm gonna just spray the top. This will help to form a crust over the bread and help to retain the natural moisture within the loaf. Right, so we're gonna bake him off for about 30 minutes. All right, so we've come to the end. Here we have our fully baked loaf of bread, or sandwich loaf, or pain de mie. So here we have. Let's check it out. So you see, golden brown top, lightly brown on the outside. Has that dome shape, you know, that classic quintessential dome shape for a loaf. And also the top got that extra color and shine. I'm not sure how well the camera is picking up, but the top is almost glistening from spraying it with the spray bottle. And also the inside of the loaf would have retained as much moisture as possible with that steam bath we created in the oven. So this bread has been cooling for about 3 to 4 hours. It's fully cooled now. You could just touch it, you could feel the bottle and just touch it, and you know it's cool to the touch. That's your sign when you know it's time to slice. You do not want to slice hot bread. I know there's an urge to eat hot bread, but really and truly, if you want that even slice, you don't want to get any clumps of any hot dough still in the center. You want to wait until it's fully cool, because even if when it comes out of the oven, the bread is still cooking on the inside. That residual heat is still finishing the inside layers of dough. Yeah, but now it's fully cool, so now we could slice. And you always want to slice at the end. You always see all these videos of people slicing straight down the middle, you know, for that crumb shot. But really and truly, remember, with these homemade bread, we aren't adding any additives, any chemical moisturizing agents to help retain moisture, to extend shelf life. This is without any of those things. So if I were to slice straight down the middle, all I will do is just fasten or quicken the drying process of the bread, and you don't want that. You want this to last for as long as possible, ideally 3 to 4 days. Once you keep it in your refrigerator, that should help to retain the moisture within the bread. So time to slice. So as I said, we're starting off at the end. Yeah, and it's a sandwich loaf, so it's not going to be a firm loaf of bread. Just using a bread knife here. You want to use something with a slightly serrated edge, nothing too sharp. You know, we don't want to adulterate the bread. Yeah. So let's just check out the inside before we go any further. So if you check out the crumb, a nice tight crumb, not seeing any large air bubbles. You know, sometimes for some reason people feel like that's a good thing. Well, for sandwich loaf, that is not a good thing. This is what you want to see. We are seeing some bigger ones, but that's all right. That's minor. And also, you know, sometimes you bake bread and you see the actual lines when you fold the bread. We're not seeing that here as well. Sometimes you see a dough mark or water mark at the bottom here. We're not seeing that. So all these things are good signs that your bread did well. And also, if you smell it, you're not getting that yeasty smell. Yeah? A lot of people like to add a lot of yeast in the bread because they don't want to wait for it to rise. But you just have a little patience and let it rise naturally, let it rise slowly. So let's continue to slice. And remember, we're not selling the bread, so the slices don't need to be even, you know. I like a thick slice. I just want to slice it to get you all to see the inside again. So you see, the crumb is very similar throughout, a slightly bigger hole there, but as I said, that's minor. So you see how easy it is for you all to make your very own sandwich loaf right at home. And one last thing before we go, we know we constantly get DMs, comments about all the appliances. We are going to include all the links to all the appliances in the caption of the video, just so you all can shop it. And of course, once again, we must thank Quartz for being the sponsor of this video. Thanks.